Hello, my name is Mike Bickle, and I'm really enthusiastic about this book that I've had the opportunity to write called After God's Own Heart. Now, in this book, the thing that I've really locked into is the heart of David and the way that King David gave himself to the Lord. This was so important that the Lord named him, the only man in history that God named, the man who's after my heart. And in this book, what I've sought to do is define in a really practical way what it means to be a person or a church or a ministry or a family after God's own heart. Now, the first thing that means that David was a man after God's own heart is that he committed himself to obey the commands of God's heart. Now, we all know that. He committed himself to obey the commands of God's heart. There's a whole lot of practical material that the Bible talks about in that regard. Secondly, more than obedience, David was a student of the emotions of God's heart. Now that's where things get a little bit more specific and not quite as common. A lot of people talk about obeying God's heart, but being students of the emotions of God's heart. How does God feel? What does God think? Now, when we're trying to obey Him, what happens when we fail? Does God wipe us off the map, so to speak? Does He write us off? No, there's a tenderness, there's a gladness, there's a zeal with tenderness in God's emotions towards us, even in our weakness. But it's not enough that we're just a people that obey the commands of God's heart. We are students of the emotions of God's heart, what I just referred to, but we also contend or we fight in prayer and fasting and obedience and serving and proclamation for the purposes in God's own heart for our generation and for our own lives. And so I've taken the life of David and set him forth, I trust in a practical way, where we're calling people to become men and women, families, ministries, churches, homes, after God's own heart. We contend to obey the commands of His heart. We become students of the emotions of His heart. And then we contend or we labor for the purposes of His heart, and we bring the three together. I am convinced in this hour of history, God is raising up a church after His own heart and a multitude of people, many young people after His own heart. And so I think that this book will be a practical encouragement and some real instruction on some how-tos to walk in that in an everyday way. So I want to recommend the book, After God's Own Heart. Thank you.